Welcome back to our HM Sofa Sessions Get Comfortable With series. I'm Callum McLean and I'm joined today by Lucy Croft, who's a senior associate in our team. It's February, and with Valentine's Day just around the corner, today we're getting comfortable with relationships in the workplace. Lucy, you've got an article on this matter, tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, thanks, Callum. Hi, everyone. Yeah, exactly that. So, workplace relationships are inevitable. We're not just talking about romantic relationships. Obviously, there can be friendships that are developed at work, um, and they can be positive, and I think they mostly are positive. But if they're not managed correctly, then they can create real legal and practical issues for employers.
Yeah, absolutely. So, let's start with the basics. Why is this something that employers need to be aware of and look to manage rather than just taking a hands-off approach?
I think because it's almost a given that relationships are formed at work. I mean, I've got friends that I've met at work that I've been friends with for over 10 years, and that's how the friendship began. So I think we need to be aware of the fact that a lot of relationships start at work. Um, and also, there is a right to a private life under Article 8 of the Human Rights Act. It's not realistic to ban workplace relationships. Where would you draw the line? Are you allowed to have friendships, but you're not allowed to have romantic relationships? Because everything that could be a practical or legal issue plays into both. So, conflicts of interest, favouritism, decision making. We've all heard terms of, oh, it's a popularity contest when we're talking about promotions and things like that. So we just need to be clear. We need clear policies to help guide employers, so that balance can be struck.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not about stopping relationships, it's about managing that risk around them.
Yeah, it's supporting managers, it's getting HR involved if you need to, seeking advice if you need to. And I guess the main thing is to make sure that however you decide to deal with these things, they're managed consistently and fairly with everyone.
Absolutely. So in the accompanying article to this conversation, we talk a lot about policy. What does good practice look like in this kind of area?
So it is useful to have a relationships at work policy. It needs to be proportionate. If you've got a smaller business of a few employees, it might be easier to have updates and catch ups. But anyone can have a policy in place. Um, it needs to acknowledge that we're not prohibiting workplace relationships. We're putting boundaries in place. We're making sure managers are on the same page. We're making sure that they know how to deal with these situations when they arise. Because if they're not dealt with properly, then they can impact work, but they can also impact business efficiency as well.
So what are some tricky areas that come up in terms of policy and relationships?
So obviously, there's things like recruitment decisions, reporting lines. These things may need to be taken into account if a relationship is started between a manager and someone who's got a job role that's beneath that manager.
Mhm.
We don't want to be seen to be allowing any favouritism or any special treatment of anyone. Um, we need to handle things sensitively. We're not trying to pry on people's relationships when we're dealing with this sort of thing. The aim really is to just make sure that we're taking the correct steps to manage any conflicts that might arise as a result of it. Reporting structures can be amended, but we need to be mindful of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of the kind of other things that you touched on in the article, you talk about marriage and civil partnership discrimination. And I feel like that's one of the protected characteristics that a lot of people seem to forget about.
Yeah, that's right. So it is often overlooked. It is a protected characteristic under the Equality Act 2010. Um, Employers can't treat um, anyone less favourably because they're married or in a civil partnership, whether that's because of benefits or opportunities that arise or even assumptions.
Mhm.
Um, commitment or flexibility, you know, if the reason for that is because they are married or in a civil partnership. So I think it's easy to forget about that protected characteristic. It doesn't come up that often, but employers do need to be mindful of that.
Yeah. And I suppose that goes to that point that even well-intentioned policies can sometimes be discriminatory or cause issues.
Yeah, they can, which is why it's always good to get advice when you're drafting a policy, just to chat through with someone about the sorts of things that you need to include, make it a bit more tailored to the business, because employers know the ins and outs of the business and how things operate and how things work and dynamics. So it's good to bear all of those things in mind. You can't discriminate against anyone, obviously. So the protected characteristics really that need to be considered aside from the marriage and civil partnership is sex, sexual orientation, even age potentially. It shouldn't be assumed that, for example, if there's any age discrepancy between a senior person and a junior person, that the automatic response is, oh, well, we'll just move that junior person to a different team, for example, because that could actually be indirectly discriminatory without meaning to. You could be indirectly discriminating against people. We also need to consider harassment. For example, if a relationship has started in the workplace and it's broken down for any reason, it's hard to sometimes manage that situation. Lines can be blurred. One party might not want to be involved anymore. The other party might want to still be involved. And then that's where we need to make sure we're considering harassment, and any complaints that come in need to be dealt with. And it's just a reminder to make sure that policies and practices are regularly reviewed. And if something does happen, we're learning from what's happened.
Yeah, and I suppose that goes to that kind of line between what is banter to some people and what is inappropriate and what constitutes harassment. And I think, as you say, people maybe trying to engage in workplace relationships, particularly romantic ones, are probably the people who are the biggest risk in terms of that could constitute harassment on the grounds of sex or something like that.
Yeah, and I think we should also remember as well that if we're allowing workplace relationships, which we are, we're not prohibiting them. If an employer's saying that this is okay, but we just need to make sure that we're managing it properly. Equally, if other employees obviously know about these potential romantic relationships, comments can get said that are banter that actually could turn into a more serious situation. So yeah, it's important to just be mindful of everything.
Absolutely, and that takes us on to that duty to prevent sexual harassment that's been in place now since October 2024.
Yeah, so this is actually a really significant shift in employment law. Employers now have a proactive legal duty to take reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment. So it's not just about responding to it when it happens or when it arises, or something's gone wrong, so we're going to deal with it. There is a proactive approach that needs to be taken.
Yeah, and obviously that's set to change even further with the ERB changes, where it's going to be all reasonable steps. I mean, what are the consequences of employers getting this wrong?
Well, I mean, if we're talking commercially, obviously, aside from any potential reputational damage, commercially, an employment tribunal can increase compensation by up to 25% if an employer hasn't taken reasonable preventative steps. And one of the biggest things that ties into that is that there shouldn't be any just tick boxing of, oh, we've got a policy that's on the shelf that nobody's opened for years. It needs to be meaningful training that happens regularly, that's engaging. If you need to outsource that training to make it a bit more interactive or make sure people are more engaged, you need to be able to evidence that you have regular, meaningful training, not just we sent you an email with a policy attached to it 5 years ago and nothing's been done since then. And as you say, there's going to be a further increase take all reasonable steps. So we really need to make sure that we're doing those things.
Yeah, and I suppose as well as that, making sure that managers are appropriately trained to deal with not just relationships in the workplace, but also harassment and things like that when these things come up.
Yeah, definitely.
So if you're an HR professional and you're watching this kind of sofa session today, I mean, what are the main takeaways you need to have?
I think it's important to focus on the culture within the business, make sure boundaries are in place, make sure that the right people have the correct amount of training to deal with this. There needs to be accountability as well on people to provide the training and make sure the policies are in place. And review and align the policies. So once they've been drafted, just, and every year or so, maybe 6 months to a year, just have a look over it, get some advice if you need to, because things do evolve, especially in employment law. Things are evolving all the time. And I suppose if you're in any doubt or you need a second opinion, just pick the phone up to whoever your trusted advisor is, us, and we can obviously guide people through that as well.
Thanks, Lucy. And for anyone watching, please do check out our HR Matters article that accompanies this. It covers things in a lot more detail. And be sure to join us next time when we're looking at a different topic and getting comfortable with that. Thank you.
Thank you.